program. If you're just tuning in, 866-963-2037 are the call lines. Stacy Washington, host of Stacy on the Right. Website, stacyontheright.com, afr.net, and urbanfamilytalk.com are the websites. At Stacy on the Right on Twitter and Instagram. And you can also find out more about me at nationalcenter.org. I am the national co-chair of Project 21 Black Leadership Council. So today we're going to talk with Kira Davis, contributor to RedState. We're also going to be discussing those issues. And you just heard coming in from the top of the hour, CNN analyst, women can't carry guns because they wear skirts and dresses. Now, for the party that claims to be the champion of the Me Too movement, for a group of individuals who claim that they are everything that matters when it comes to women and women's rights, it's awfully funny to hear one of their people, who clearly he missed the media training on this, it is not difficult for women to carry firearms. Wearing a dress and carrying a firearm are not mutually exclusive. In fact, there are so many different items that you can utilize to carry firearms on your person and in your accoutrement, so your purse, your wristlet. I mean, you would be amazed at the opportunities that are out there that exist for women to carry firearms. So what's important? Not letting women in America, or anywhere for that matter, hear this guy with his poppycock, unsubstantiated kind of man-speak, his mansplaining about women carrying firearms, not letting that go into your mind and sit there and become your truth. If you want to carry a firearm, then you need only go online and shop at the numerous retailers that are women-owned and find something that works for you. A lot of these places have local presences in retailers, so gun shops, ranges, they carry the material so you can go try it out for yourself, put it in your hand, see what it feels like to you. Maybe even give it a test run at the range. If they're selling it at the range, they will often let you try it out before you purchase it. You try it out in their range, you use their firearms, you do what you need to do, and then you can purchase it or say, no thanks. And then you can be informed about this on your own. So one of the main things that is super important about having a Second Amendment is that the information is out there, and we have to be empowered to take that information ourselves and be informed ourselves, not to just rely on what media types and talking heads, even radio hosts, are saying about it. And it would be different if we were 100 years ago, before when your once a week or once a day glance at the newspaper was your total news consumption, and everything else was what your neighbors told you or who wrote you a letter and from across the country or across town, and you could read the letter and find anything out. Nowadays, the information is as close as your fingertips. You use your internet, use your Google, use your DuckDuckGo or your Bing search engine and find out for yourself. I can't stress it enough. That guy is totally wrong about women carrying firearms. It's not a matter of whether or not women can carry on a regular basis. It's a matter of which women choose to carry because they want to, and how much training they decide to access because it's all available. All right. So I want to kind of move over. It's same topic. Ben Shapiro, who is brilliant over at the Daily Wire and everywhere, really, nationally syndicated columnist and radio host and everything you can think of. He was actually being interviewed. I believe this interview occurred at CPAC last week. And he was asked by a liberal who was there interviewing people on guns, asking questions of CPAC attendees, assuming, they're on the right, they're conservatives or Republicans, what have you, about how to stop school shootings, expecting to get, just a barrage of, we need to keep guns legal, yada, 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 so no solutions. But the fact is, many of us have been advocating for solutions long before the current spate of school shootings reached its frequency. Before this level was ever attained, I was writing op-eds about it and getting them placed in newspapers across the country 5, 6, 7 years ago, we're talking about. So the idea that conservatives don't have anything to say about this or don't have any new ideas or anything that could work, it's ridiculous. So talking implementation, talking about what could work, Ben Shapiro had some fantastic answers. It's number 4.
A few of the ones that I've proposed are, number 1, dramatically heighten school security. So I went to a private school where there were armed security guards in uniform, a certain number of guards per certain number of students. There were hard barriers. You had to show ID to get into the school, or at least they had to know who you were. And this seems to me a minimum that we should be doing as a society for the kids. I mean, we should be guarding our kids the way we guard our banks. So that would be number 1. Beyond that, I think that David French's proposal for a gun violence restraining order is not a bad one. The idea that people who are close to you can go and petition a court to have your right to bear arms temporarily removed from you, and then if they want that renewed, then they have to go back to the court and demonstrate additional evidence, but that would at least prevent the sale of guns to the sort of person who just shot up Parkland. And then, of course, on the media side, I've suggested, we're doing it at Daily Wire, that we will not print the names or the photos of the mass shooters, because there are studies that suggest that actually increases the chances of mass shooting. I'd like to see people in the media put their ratings second and put their morality first, put their money where their mouth is on this sort of stuff.
Okay, so this has been brought up by numerous public figures, commentators, etc. Don't say that the mass shootings, in other words, the kids are actually watching. We now have evidence that the kids are actually watching the mass shooters and what kind of publicity they get, and they're doing that because they want to get the same thing too. They want to achieve a level of fanfare of famousness by doing a mass shooting, and they want to do it in kind of a methodical way. They follow the same kind of script that others who've done the same thing have followed. So the question is, do we want to give them that kind of freedom? Do we want to give them that kind of ability to claim that they're famous too? Do we want to give them the name recognition? And I think one of the answers to that is that we should really rethink how we report on these. Yes, you report that there was a school shooting. Yes, you report that something occurred, but naming the individual, we could call them individual A, individual 1. If there's more than individual 1, individual 2. Don't even give them the notoriety that they seek, because they look at the previous school shootings, especially Columbine, and we're now finding that in case after case after case of school shootings, these kids have actually watched videos. They've learned all about the sequencing of the events for Columbine, and then they try to replicate it, but they put their own twist on it so that it becomes uniquely their homage to Columbine, yet in their own way, which then gives them a certain level of notoriety. So am I right about that? It's not something that is easy for us to do. It's not something that we can actually say, oh my goodness, what we're hoping for is, that we can report on this fully and completely, and we want to be able to kind of go into and delve into these people's lives. Maybe we don't need to know. Maybe we're not able to do that. And it's upsetting. It's something that is difficult for us to take, but we have to figure out ways to take away the payoff and the reward from these individuals who are doing these school shootings. Because for all of our talk about how crazy they are, it's also a bit of a thing with how they're not really. How crazy can you be if you actually study up on how to get it done and then replicate how someone else did it and then add your own twist to it to make sure that you can be famous for what you did? How crazy can you really be? I mean, there's a certain level of planning and forethought that goes into this that flies in the face of this whole, he's a deranged monster, he's a lunatic, he's crazy, he's not someone who could do this or that. That is, it's a bit different. It doesn't make sense. So what my hope is that people will pay attention to what Ben Shapiro is saying. And so am I hoping that CNN and others will listen and change the way they report? Yeah, I'm hoping that. Is it likely? Probably not. Not because they couldn't do it or they lack the ability to do it. And not because there aren't some people working at organizations like CNN who would want to see that done, but because it comes from someone on the right, Ben Shapiro, obviously on the right side of the political spectrum. So they'll immediately dismiss it out of hand and not even consider it. But this is supposed to be a conversation. So I've been watching some of the other interviews that have been going on about this, and I'm seeing a clear pattern. And that is the left is really trying to shut down anyone who says, yesterday we listened to some audio of one of the fathers. His daughter was killed in the Parkland shooting. And he said, this isn't about guns. And there are actually quite a few people online who are saying the same thing. Yet here we are again. People are discussing the NRA. People are attacking the NRA spokespeople, the leadership of the NRA. They're even attacking the rank and file members of the NRA. I think it's going to backfire. One of the things that I think in unintended consequence that's happening is we're seeing a lot of people join the NRA or renew their memberships that had lapsed because of this attack. There's also, I believe, in the Georgia legislature, there was a bill going through that was going to give $40 million a year in tax breaks to Delta Airlines. And now that Delta has ceased their discount relationship with the NRA, now that is up in the air in the legislature in the state of Georgia. $40 million a year in tax breaks is quite that's not small potatoes for a company like Delta Airlines. The fact that they were negotiating that means it was something that's important to them that they hope to get to help with their bottom line. So I feel like, this is internecine warfare. It's us fighting each other when we should be working together. So one of the other things that I was thinking through as we were moving through this subject last night, I was watching the news and I talked about it a little bit with my husband, and there was even some back and forth between some of my friends and I. And I was saying that, it's really school boards where this gets made up, where this gets handled. School boards are where you're going to find that people they're responsive to you. Their kids go to the same district. They live in your neighborhood. You see them at Walgreens. So I encourage people who are concerned about the safety measures at their kids' school to attend the school board meeting, approach the school board members and talk to them. And the funding isn't the issue. I don't care what they say to you. The funding's not the issue because every district has capital improvement fund that they put money into for boilers and air conditioners and things like that. And you can appropriate some of that money to make changes and then build it back up over time. But you should have minimum safety standards and single entry point systems at your school. And if you don't, head over and talk to your school board members. Attend those meetings. Let them know you want those things and you're a parent and you have a right to protect your kids. All right. We'll be back with more right after this.
American Family Radio and Preborn are partnering to help save babies' lives throughout America.
Well, my name is Dan Steiner, and I'm the president of Preborn. 80% of the time, she'll choose life.
Be a compassionate answer to abortion and help save a baby's life. Go to preborn.com now. That's preborn.com. Or dial pound 250 and say keyword baby. That's pound 250 and say baby. All gifts are tax deductible. Your love can save a life.
Hi, I'm Crawford Loritz with a Legacy Moment. Not long ago, I saw a heavyweight championship fight. The reigning champion was the overwhelming favorite, and he knew it. There was no way this little-known challenger should ever win this fight, but he did. The challenger was hungry and prepared, and the champion happened to be overconfident and ill-prepared. He was knocked out cold in the 5th round. Are you prepared for battle? Are you really serious about your commitment to Christ? Or are you just going through the religious motions? Are you doing just enough to get by? You don't necessarily feel the heat, and maybe you're just coasting a little bit. Sometimes we don't take seriously the fact that we're in the midst of battle. In Ephesians chapter 6, verses 10 through 12, we have the sobering reminder that this is not heaven, and we're engaged in a struggle. Listen to these words. Finally, be strong in the Lord and in the strength of his might. Put on the full armor of God that you may be able to stand firm against the schemes of the devil. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the powers, against the world forces of this darkness, against the spiritual forces of wickedness in the heavenly places. Here we're told the nature of our battle. This is not heaven. This is not home. This is where we are. The earth is a battleground between the kingdom of darkness and the kingdom of light, and we're in the midst of that warfare. We need God's strength for the fight. We don't have what it takes. Well, here's what I want you to remember today. Please don't underestimate the power of our opponent. We must be prepared. Now, our confidence and strength is in the Lord. Stand in his strength, and there's no way you can lose.
More information about the ministry of Crawford Loritz can be found online at livingalegacy.org.
This is Stacy on the Right on Urban Family Talk.
There's a perception, at least, that this is a lot of rural districts where they know that help might be 20, 25 minutes away. Are there armed staff ready to go in suburban or urban districts in Colorado? Yeah, and you're right. So the rural schools have always been the early adopters because they and their county sheriffs know it's 30 minutes before anybody shows up. There's a lot of interest, I'll tell you, in urban and suburban schools because they know that these things can happen in a matter of 2 minutes. And so it's not the 30-minute problem, but it's the how many people could get shot in 2 minutes. Even if a cop is sitting in the parking lot. So a lot of folks are thinking about it. Now in suburban and urban schools, I haven't heard anybody or of any schools where armed staff is there, but definitely school resource officers and armed and uniformed security officers. Can we talk about that deterrence aspect of it? How much of the idea of arming teachers, in your opinion, is about the deterrence, and how much of it is about the actual interdiction of a live shooter? Because we see time and time again, these shooters are perfectly willing to go into schools where they know there is armed security. We've seen that in Colorado and elsewhere. Yeah, and you have to think about the mindset of these monsters, and they are monsters. They want to go in and take as many innocent people as they want. So in cases where there is an armed security guard uniformed or a school resource officer, they do everything they can to start their business away from that person. And so that's why from actually interdicting a situation as it's happening, having somebody that nobody knows, the bad guy at least doesn't know who it is, potentially closer. And that's what we saw in the Arapahoe High School shooting, is that school resource officer sprinted at full speed. It took him 45 seconds to get there. That ended the situation, but Claire Davis had already been killed. Right.
All right, welcome back. Welcome back to Stacy on the Right. Bear with me today. I had to have an invasive procedure this morning and a test, and so I'm not running at 100%, but I am so glad to be here. It makes you all the more grateful to get to do your work when you have to spend the whole morning, like 6 hours at the doctor's office. I did get a chance to pick up some promotional materials, of which you will see over is this my right shoulder? My little Urban Family Communications logo action I got going on right there. More to come on that. So you just were listening to a little bit of a discussion here. And what we have to do with this is we have to really understand what she's talking about. It's Laura Carno. The program is Faster. She founded it in Colorado. She's making the argument for arming teachers. And one of the things that is so interesting about this program that she's brought to Colorado, it's been implemented across the country, different training systems in up to 25 states, but 15 of the states are actually using this system, Faster. And the reason why she brought this to the fore is because she wanted to make sure that teachers who wanted to be armed had the opportunity. So the class is called Faster. It stands for Faculty Administrator Safety Training and Emergency Response. That's a mouthful. Let's try it again. Faculty Administrator Safety Training and Emergency Response. The program offers medical and firearms training for school staffers authorized to be armed on their campus. So first of all, if you're not authorized to be armed on your campus, if your school board and administration has not given you that right, then you can take this training, but it doesn't give you the right to do that. So this keeps the decision-making process with the administrators in the school district. It's absolutely, what parents want. Because if you're in a school district where the parents have voted and put in school board members, and those school board members are reflecting their constituents and they're instructing the administrators to permit firearms for properly trained personnel on the campus, that's the way it's supposed to work. That is what local control and education is all about. When you're in a school district where people have opted against that and are instead choosing school resource officers that are provided to them by their local taxing authority. So whatever municipality you live in, the police department that governs that allocates one to you. That resource is paid for by the district, meaning you pay that police officer's salary and they spend their days in your buildings. Then that's what your local control has brought you. That's what you want. In all of these discussions, it is paramount that the system that's in place reflects the desire of the people who are actually using the item. So in this case, public schools, in this case, locally controlled by school boards elected by constituents in that district. You have to be in the district, living there with the residents there. And then you get to vote on who's going to be in school board. And the school board members campaign in the district, and they go out and knock on doors, and they volunteer in the district before they ever go on to school board. So the parents know this is a person who knows these buildings, who's been in these buildings. This is a person who their kids either go here or they graduated here. And in some cases, their kids went there, graduated, and then now teach in the district. That was the case for so many of the school board members where I was on school board when I was a school board member. So this is I think it's something that gets lost when we're fighting on the national level about national issues. We forget that the majority of the command and control still, it rests with us, because the people that we elect on the local level are the ones who have the most control over this. Yes, the federal Department of Education can make statements, and they can send out edicts from on high, and they can tie it to federal dollars. But the majority, well, not in every case. Let me be clear. In a lot of districts where it's socioeconomically disadvantaged, the bulk of the money that the school district receives for their per pupil expenditures, so per kid, based on daily attendance, comes from the federal government. But in districts like the one where I came from, there's almost no federal money. There's like 3 or 4% comes from the feds, another couple of percent from the state. The remainder, over 90%, comes from the taxing, the people who are paying the taxes. So in that case, in any case, you're going to want to do what the constituents are asking you to do. You're going to want to reflect what the people who are electing you are asking of the elected officials. But in this case, we were talking about safety, and the money was already allocated and passed, but not implemented. There's a lot of failure going on in the Parkland story. And so I know the Parkland story is actually not, it's not the norm for there to have been 39 police calls and 2 FBI tips and numerous social media, referrals. That's not normal. Usually there's something brewing on the ground, but if it was missed, it's because there wasn't very much. There wasn't a lot of, oh, this person seems disturbed. This person, the school's ignoring it. Everyone's ignoring it. It's usually not that case. It's usually the case that if there was some bullying, that was ignored, but that's a whole nother show. And I mean, I'm kind of half and half about having the discussion about the bullying and doing a whole, half hour and dedicating it to that, or 2 segments. Because in the end, as parents, if your child is being bullied and it's not being addressed by the school, which is often the case, then your option is to leave or to figure out workarounds so that you can stay there and not lose your opportunity to be in that educational environment. And so we've done both at our house. And I feel like, it's almost a punishment for teaching your kids to keep their hands and feet to themselves, teaching your kids not to insult others, to basically raising your kids like, human beings instead of raising them like farm animals. Then if you do that, then basically you're exposing your kids to all of the abuse from the other kids who are being raised like farm animals. So, the answer there is obviously it's individual and you have to decide what to do. But a lot of these school shooters report that they were bullied by somebody, that they felt like they were being attacked, that they had a whole lot of negative interactions with students. That points to teachers, which is why, as great as this program sounds, I'm wondering, the same people who refuse to address bullying in their classrooms, we would be encouraging them to be armed. I guess the ones who won't address bullying in their classrooms would be the same ones who wouldn't want to be armed. I guess that's what we would hope. So anyway, the program that she's talking about began in Ohio, where Buckeye Firearms Foundation has trained this curriculum to more than 1,000 school and staff members over the past 5 years. Laura Carno is an activist. She's fantastic. She's written a book. She's done all the cool stuff, but she doesn't work in a school. So she attended the FASTER training so that she could learn about it and be an advocate for it. She says when she got back from Ohio, she wrote a blog called Keeping Kids Safe in a Broken World. She was in awe of the people who chose to attend the class when she went. Some of the people who chose to attend the class when she attended, teachers, principals, janitors. They all vowed to place themselves between bullets and kids as part of training to learn how to stop the threat in order to save lives. And so she then committed herself after attending the training to bring that training to Colorado schools to protect kids in Colorado. Coloradans for Civil Liberties and Independence Institute assisted her in accomplishing that task by bringing faster training to Colorado school staff members, and the media took notice. So regardless of their ideology, they were fascinated by the program and the fact that people were opting to take it on their own. In other words, not forced to take it. It's brought to Colorado by not school districts, not school board associations, but two independent organizations. And then teachers could opt to take the training, meaning they weren't pressured by their administrators. They weren't pressured by parents. They were just, hey, I'm interested. I'm going to take the class. So Denver's ABC affiliate, Colorado Springs NBC affiliate, the Denver Post, the Blaze, Louder with Crowder, the Heritage Foundation's Daily Signal, Bearing Arms, America's First Freedom, AMOLand, NPR, WNYC in New York, and CNN Headline News, The Hill, Breitbart, the Greeley Tribune. These are all of the organizations that chose to cover the story when she initially brought this training to the state of Colorado. And their inaugural FASTER class had nearly 80 media mentions. Nearly all of the mentions were neutral to positive in their coverage of arming staff. So I think one of the things we have to do is keep in mind that what works in Colorado may or may not work in your school district. The issue is not to vilify it before you know what it is or to demonize it because Laura Carno happens to be a conservative, but to look at the issue at hand, which is keeping kids safe in school. And then to take that issue, that goal, we want to keep kids safe in school. How do we do that? And then you look at all of the different avenues by which you can accomplish that. If it means arming some teachers in some schools and other schools opting for resource officers, other schools, all schools should be hardening their facilities. But schools that have not yet even begun to do that, to move into that arena and start to harden their facilities. And for all parents, regardless of whether your kids are in private school or public school, and even if they're homeschooled, because the funny thing about us entering the homeschooling community for 1 year this year is that we've learned that there's so much overlap between the kids. So the kids attend different summer camps and they do different things with youth groups and all of that. And in that, our daughter is constantly saying, oh, she's in my class at college, because she's taking college classes already. So, oh, we're in the same class at college. His sister goes to my sister's school. I'm like, oh, really? What's the name? I don't think I've ever seen. So now we're starting to see parents and we're like, oh, she's also, so they have a multiple schooling situation in their home where they have one kid who's homeschooled and one who's not. So if that's the case where we are, that's indicative of all over the place, where families will not only have one kid homeschooled, another one at a private school, another one at a public school, but they'll have all of those different things going on in a family or an extended family, which means as disconnected as we feel, we are that much more connected. So if one group of kids in one educational environment knows a kid is trouble, that information actually travels outside of that initial group, the group where that kid goes to school. That means all we have to do as parents is plug into our own kids. They are information central. This is their world we're talking about. So we have to be more intent than ever on interfacing with our kids. And I'm not talking about, the Barbara Walters thing as much as that's my favorite interview style. Just go straight into it. Ask all the questions, eye contact, all that. Kids don't respond to that. They really don't. They respond to casual conversation that's an ongoing type of a thing. And that's much harder to do. It takes a lot more time. You have to be interested in that kind of communication. But once you get it started and get it rolling, that's when the details start coming out about which ones are, sexually active, which ones, have the most risque Instagram accounts. I mean, it's amazing what they'll tell you. And then when you learn that, it's not about learning it and go, oh, they're such a horrible kid. It's about just being plugged in so that when that crucial bit of information about the one who talks about guns all the time and just got suspended from school, but is still in the circle, in the environment that your kids are in, still exposed to your kids and the friends and neighbors' kids, the church kids, all the kids that are in that it's a huge social group. then you can actually do something about it. And this is not about demonizing anyone, but if we're not willing to take even those steps, just basically getting to know our own kids and having an open line of communication, if we're not going to do that, well, then what can we expect? Look, I was talking yesterday on the show about how the Freedom from Religion Institute, or whatever they call themselves, foundation, they want to take down a mural with a Bible verse and an eagle on it in a little town. Leftists, Democrats, and other people that otherwise are great and wonderful to have tea with, they're working hard. They're talking to their kids, people who believe in religion. They're not scientific. They're just not smart. Studies show that people who believe in God aren't as smart as people who don't. It's sad when people don't believe the truth about science and all of that. They're constantly pounding their kids with this information. Okay, I'm back.
It take to live an uncommon life? Here's former Super Bowl winning coach Tony Dungy with today's uncommon moment.
Everyone loves to work on their strengths, but only great people work on their weaknesses. The ability to take an honest look at yourself and examine who you are, what makes you tick, what makes you do the things you do, is a mark of maturity for a mentor leader. This self-examination should be more intentional and regular, not something dictated by the demands of a particular moment. In everything we do, our desire should be to honor God by actively seeking to become more like people He wants us to be. Not only is an unexamined life not worth living, to echo Socrates, but it's also a weak place from which to lead.
Tony Dungy, author of the popular Uncommon book series. Discover more at CoachDungy.com. That's CoachDungy.com.
Coming next week on The Dwelling Place. Pastor Al Pittman continues to walk us through the Bible, line by line and verse by verse, to let God show us just how timeless His truth is. That's next week on The Dwelling Place.
Faith is not a concept you visit. It's a lifestyle you possess.
Dr. Tony Evans explains why faith has to be more than just a way of thinking.
Because if I'm not rolling by faith, then I'm not experiencing God in my circumstances. Because that's how the righteous roll.
A look at people just like you and me who went on to become heroes of the faith. Coming up this week on The Alternative with Dr. Tony Evans.
Life so irreplaceable. I can't imagine life without you. It's just unthinkable. There's no one like you. No one like you. You're 1 in 7 billion. There's no one like you. No one like you.
We are all created by God with undeniable purpose. Learn more about beautiful possibility at www.radiance.life. Follow us on Twitter at Life Has Purpose.
This is Stacy on the Right on Urban Family Talk.
3 high-ranking Florida officials are expressing their frustration because they say EMS was delayed getting inside Stoneman Douglas High School on the day of the shooting in the critical moments when victims lay inside in need of immediate care. One source tells Fox News some EMS teams requested to go inside but were denied by the commanding agency, the Broward County Sheriff's Office. That source alleges scanner recordings will reveal that. Now, the Broward County Sheriff's Office released a statement in response to some of these allegations, saying in part there are multiple investigations being conducted in addition to the Stoneman Douglas shooting. Investigators will not be rushed or asked to jump to conclusions. A reporter from our Miami affiliate WSVN reports that a seasoned first responder said they would have risked their life to go inside and that they were frustrated the entire time they were there. However, the Coral Springs Parkland fire chief, who was on scene that day, says it is procedure that EMS cannot go inside until law enforcement clears them to enter. The fire chief says law enforcement could not initially confirm if the suspect fled or was deceased, making it too dangerous to let EMS inside. That fire chief telling Fox News in part, decisions cannot be made in a vacuum. It is possible that those that are upset about not being allowed inside simply do not have all of the information that our law enforcement partners had in making their decision. The Florida Department of Law Enforcement is investigating all the actions by the Broward County Sheriff, which will hopefully shed light on the timeline of that day.
Wow. So a lot of investigations running concurrently. For those watching on Facebook, we lost the Comrex feed. And so that's why you saw me kind of like react. And then I had to go into the other screen and reconnect for the radio listeners. So sorry about that to the radio listeners. Not sure what happened. Comrex dropping. Not sure what that's all about, but I'm not an engineer, so have no idea. But we are back, and I think everything is up and going fine. I was making the point that we really have to fight as hard as the liberals do to maintain our way of life. And I think we're hard workers, and we believe in leaving other people to themselves. We believe in the right to govern yourself, self-governance. We believe in independent thought and making decisions for yourself. And we think if you want to do something, you should have the right to make that choice to do it. Well, that kind of, industrious, leave me alone so I can get my work done attitude then results in other people who really want to control everyone. They're busy working 24 hours a day, behind the scenes, in front of the scenes, on top of the scenes, in between the scenes. They're working to try to get things fixed so that you don't have a choice. And so that's what we're up against. And so you kind of have to basically press down the urge to just worry about yourself and really re-engage with it's the culture. It's the culture. And so you've got the secularists over the past, I don't know, since, the 70s, since the sexual revolution, the 60s, 70s, that time frame, they've been working hard to change what is normal behavior. And they've been also simultaneously working to push back against and completely eliminate Christianity from the public sphere. And so, my question, and I have to keep asking it, for those who are out there who feel like Christianity shouldn't have any role in public life, Christians should sit down and shut up, people of faith don't have any business, even no Merry Christmas, no nativity sets, no Bible verses. They're perfectly fine with having the Bible available in chapels and all of that for people in prison. But for people who are out in the world and making choices, well, we can't have anybody offended by the sight of a Bible verse. Well, my question is, how's that working out for you? As things continue to go to pot, do you really feel like this push towards secularism and authorizing every deviancy and renaming things that were once considered to be mental illnesses and serious medical conditions, making those normative behavior? How is it working out for you? And miss me with this discussion about, well, that doesn't have anything to do with school shootings. Of course it does. All of it goes together. That's like you saying you're rubbing carburetor acid into your skin every night and you go into the doctor and he says, you're developing some serious stomach issues. Can you tell me a little bit about what you're doing? And you tell him everything you're doing except the rubbing of the carburetor acid into your skin. He's going to be baffled and try to figure out. He can't accurately diagnose what's going on with you because you've left out one key element. The culture is like the skin of America, and we're rubbing all kinds of crazy things into it instead of protecting it from too much sun damage and keeping the moisturizing agents light and using a soap that doesn't have too many fragrances in it. I mean, come on. Do you really think we as a country can continue to head down a path that is immoral and refuses to acknowledge that there is right, there is wrong, there is light, there is dark, there is good, there is evil? As long as we continue to ignore that and just go with everyone's feelings and elevate the most base instincts that all humans possess. And then when someone says, what's wrong with America? The boys are just shooting up all the schools. And you say, well, I don't know what's wrong with it. It's probably the guns. Really? You think it's just the fact that we have guns in this country? And you also think you're going to be able to stop it by banning the sale and importation of new guns, ignoring the fact that there are 350 million guns here right now? What exactly do you think you're going to do about those? And before you start talking about confiscation, are you going to be the one going door to door to confiscate guns? Don't start talking, well, we'll have the National Guard do it. Don't start talking about other people's kids and other people's family members going and doing this work. It's your idea. Why don't you start the movement to make this happen? So we have to see this in the context of what it is. All of these things intersect. They all work together or they all break apart. It's all a part of the same process, the same life that we're all living. And as much as we may try to kind of pick ourselves up and you're in this school district, you're in that school district, your kids are in this private school, they're in that, you're going to this church, they're going to that. They don't go to church, you do. We have these segmentation with, this is the way we live, that's the way they live. These are facts of life, but they don't insulate us from the impacts of our negative culture. There's no escaping it. The Bible talks about judgment when it comes on a nation. It doesn't just come on the people who are in the same geographical area. It comes on everyone who belongs to that particular tribe, that nation. When the judgment comes upon them, it comes upon all of them, which is why numerous times in the Bible, you see God says, well, if you can find me, you can find me 100 righteous, I'll spare him. If you find me 10 righteous, I'll spare him. Find me one righteous man, I'll spare the whole thing. Because he understands that you can have plenty of people who are living for him in amongst the folks who have just decided, you know what? Get in the back. I'm turning my back on you, God. I don't want to have anything to do with that. We have to fight. And so we've heard this many times. We've heard people, we're losing America. We're losing our nation. We've heard all of those discussions, but I'm not talking about fighting on social media or fighting with people that you know at work around the water cooler or fighting in amongst, your own family with people who are different politically or believe different things morally. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about fighting in the way that makes the most difference. So that starts off with prayer. Praying it's without ceasing. We have to be going to God with these problems. And we have to be reading the word and putting that out there. We have to be and by putting it out there, what do I mean by that? We're living it. We're worrying about ourselves. What would happen in America if every Christian family just said, we're going to live for Jesus. We're going to leave off the compromise. We're going to really focus on making our family as much like Christ as we can. That would shift this entire country because there are so many of us who are Christians and we're living for Christ, but it's in a way that's not offensive. It's in a way that it's not weird. And so, I'm one of the first people, I don't believe in that whole, you can only wear skirts movement or, women can't talk in front of men. And there's a whole bunch of other stuff that's kind of, it's almost like cult-like where you're like, I'm not sure if that's what the Bible says. In fact, I'm pretty sure the Bible doesn't say anything like that. But there are things that we can do that it basically allows the sweet fragrance of Christ's work in us to show through. And this is a struggle for every Christian. So I'm not sitting here, on high, prognosticating down to anyone. I'm right here in that real moment too. I struggle with all of the things. And it's a constant, I'm back at that again. Lord, help me. I gotta work this thing through. And there's often other times where I realize I'm just so frustrated with myself. I'm not praying at all. So this is something we all have to work on. But imagine what we could do as Christians with discipleship and with loving other people, hurting people, and helping them to understand that this isn't a fight against the people themselves. It's a fight against the rulers, the principalities, the dark and wicked spirits of this age. It's a heavenly battle. It's a spiritual battle. And we're engaged. We're here. There's no getting away from it. There are only two sides. You're in it on one side or you're in it on the other. And what I'm seeing in this whole school shooting thing, especially with this last one, as it's unfolding, and the other mass shootings that have occurred, because those don't happen in a vacuum by themselves either. There's a certain thing that we're doing in this country that's bringing us the increase in violence in the homeland. We know what that is. We have to address it or the violence will continue. It's the same thing now coming forward with these school shootings and with these young boys, these young men who are doing these horrible acts. We know there's something that needs to change. And I posit that it is our relationship with God. So I've heard Abraham Hamilton III on his program talk sometimes about how God will remove his hand of blessing from a nation, and then you begin to see judgment, and the judgment is ever increasing until the people repent and turn away from their wicked ways. And he's right about that. I mean, that's biblical. That comes straight out of the Word of God. And so when we see the children start rising up and killing the other children, that's a wake-up call for us. And for those of us who understand, we can go to the Bible and find the direct application for this. We can find God's instructions on how to come back from this. We know it doesn't have to be the end. If you heard me fill in for Sandy Rios last week, I got the opportunity to fill in and guest host her program. And it was a momentous day because I actually had asked her producer when he said, would you like a guest? I said, this is a big request, but could you get me Dr. Michael Brown? And he was able to do it. So I just heard Michael Brown, the Dr. Michael Brown, author of I don't know how many books. He preaches all over the world. He'd just been at my church that Sunday. So after hearing him at church on Sunday, and we talked about him over brunch, and we have some of his books here at the house. I even went back and watched the other two sermons he preached because we have 3 services a weekend. And so I was just totally immersed in what he had shared. And then we even stayed for the Q&A and listened to people in the congregation asking him questions, and people had texted in. And then to get to interview him that day that I filled in for her on that Wednesday. And then the same hour, it's all over the news, Fox and everywhere else, that Billy Graham had passed on and gone on to his reward to be with the Lord. And so then we had a guest on the program from American Family Association, one of the reporters, long time, he's on her show all the time, on all the other shows, on the breaks at the top of the hour when you hear the news. He came on and he'd written a piece for One News Now. He talked about the impact of Billy Graham's life. And as we were sitting there talking, it hit me. First of all, we feel sad when someone like that passes on to be with the Lord, but he's gone on to his reward. And people regularly say that Billy Graham probably evangelized more people than any other person on the face of this planet who's ever lived, except obviously Jesus Christ, because he did those crusades and he traveled around the world, and he just preached the gospel and people responded to him. And so while I was interviewing Dr. Mike Brown, he echoed his comments at our church on Sunday and said that his book, The Fall and Rise of America, that book that's the order. That order is proper because God gave him that order and said to him, look, it's not about the rise and fall of America. It's about the fall and rise of America. And I can do anything with this nation, but people have to cry out in repentance, turn from their wicked ways. We have to have revival. And so as he was talking, I thought to myself, we tend to look at it in a very fatalistic view, but we serve a God who can do all things, a God who has planned for every contingency in our lives. If you think about it, just think about how if you've planned something out, if you've planned any project at all, how you'll build in contingency for that project so that if things go wrong, you have a certain percentage of the budget dedicated to taking care of those unforeseen problems or contingencies. And then think about all of the different, if you're a student of math and probability, I'm not, hint, this is not my stuff, that in probabilities, you can actually calculate all of the different possibilities and contingencies, right? Now think about how we exist in this time-space continuum. We just have the 3 dimensions plus time, and that's all we've got. And I've seen a video at church where they have the stick figurine, it's on the piece of paper and it moves around on the paper, but it knows the edges of the paper are its boundaries, and it cannot stand itself up vertically and assume another dimension. Now, understand that we're like those stick figures, and this world and all of our everything that we can see and hear and smell and touch and time, that's all of us on the stick paper. We're sticks on the paper, little figures running around. And then you've got God. Every decision you make, every decision you could possibly make, every contingency, he's already planned all of that out, and he's working it all out for your good. He's at the end of time. He's at the beginning of time. He's right here, right now for every human on this planet and everywhere in this entire known universe and unknown, all simultaneously, all in control. You're telling me a God like that can't do something about these school shootings? All we have to do is ask. Please don't forget to pray about this situation. That's what we're called to do. We'll be back with Hour 2 right after this. Stay there.
Urban Family Talk. Urban Family Talk.
I'm Will Addison, Director of Urban Family Talk. Our motto is truth, wisdom, and empowerment. We felt that this motto reflects what we want to be to the urban community. We ask God today to give our community wisdom from God, truth, which is Jesus Christ, and empowerment through the Holy Spirit as we seek to be the community that God has called the Black community to be. Stay connected at urbanfamilytalk.com.
Truth, wisdom, empowerment. Urban Family Talk, a ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh. Delta Airlines could end up paying a big price in Georgia for its
MS-13 has spread across the country. This is a violent and dangerous criminal organization. You can call it a criminal organization, you can call it a terrorist organization, but the bottom line is that MS-13 poses a danger on the streets of the United States.
Melman agrees with Vaughn that Congress needs to take steps to get these gang members off the streets. I'm Chad Groening.
American Family Association has a request for one of the largest universities in Mississippi. Chris Woodward explains.
Mississippi State University's Gender Studies program has scheduled a presentation by abortionist Dr. Willie Parker on Thursday, March 1st. The event, co-sponsored by other academic-based programs under the authority of MSU President Mark Keenum and Provost Dr. Judy Bonner, will take place on the Starkville campus and is titled Abortion and the Christian Case for Choice. AFA's Walker Wildman says it is one thing for MSU to have the liberty to invite and pay for academic guest speakers of their choosing, but it is troubling to see that such a controversial speaker as Dr. Parker would garner the endorsement of the president and provost.
We're specifically asking the university and President Mark Keenum to provide equal time and an equal honorarium to a speaker to present the Christian case for life.
To be clear, AFA says abortion is murder, and there is no biblical argument which supports the taking of innocent life from the womb. In fact, AFA points to Exodus 20:13 or "you shall not murder" as a biblical argument against abortion.
If you'll visit our website, afa.net, you can see this alert and actually email President Keenum or call his office and ask him to provide equal opportunity for a pro-life speaker.
AFN has reached out to Mississippi State University for comment. I'm Chris Woodward.
Teachers in West Virginia took their protest for better wages and benefits to the State House on Monday, forcing the public school system to shut down in all 55 counties for the fourth straight day. Boone County Commissioner Craig Bratcher.
They can go somewhere else and make $5,000 to $10,000 more a year.
Teachers are also protesting the recent 2% raise that they say isn't enough and doesn't prevent teachers from leaving the state. And Wall Street has been drifting into negative territory this morning. At last check, the Dow had dropped 42 points. American Family News is available online at onenewsnow.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter and download the One News Now mobile app. I'm Rusty Pugh.
Lonnie Poindexter.
Don't ever ask God for patience. Just say, "Oh Lord, help me to be more patient." No, don't do that. Well, why, Lonnie? Why shouldn't I do that? He'll give it to you, but you're not going to like how you get it. Well, Lonnie, what do you mean? How do you get patience? Trials and tribulations, my brethren. That's how you get it.
Lion Chasers. Weekday mornings at 10 Central on Urban Family Talk. Welcome to Stacy on the Right with your host, Stacy Washington.
Wow.
Oh, is he sad?
I'm
sad?
You know,
So
what the Republicans are learning right now? Yeah. That sometimes being black isn't enough. They thought, we're going to get a black guy to run our party. This is a lesson that Willie and I learned growing up on the hard scrabbled streets of the Mississippi Delta. Right? We're 12 minutes in. Yeah, exactly. Like, no, seriously. Seriously, they said, hey, we got a great idea.
Explain yourself seriously.
I don't.
That's just
oh, are you offended by that?
No, I'm not offended. I just want to make sure.
Hey, everybody, I was joking. I did not grow up a young black man on the Mississippi Delta. That was Steve Martin in The Jerk, right? Yeah, glad I cleared that up. Okay, is that politically correct, Mika? I hope I didn't offend any of your friends.
Coming up on the show.
Hold on. So what I'm talking about, Mike Barnacle, is the fact. I'll do it like Pat Buchanan.
Who is that? That is Mika and Joe Brzezinski, back when Mika's hair was brown with gold highlights, and she was still co-hosting with Joe Scarborough. This was before he donned the ever so cool glasses, black rimmed glasses, and he was, I guess, wearing contacts back then. And it was a different time in this country, and he was, of course, mocking Michael Steele being black. So first thing I want to say is, everyone gets mocked. Everyone has something that other people hit them on, and people know how to figure out what your thing is and hit you on it. They don't have to know you to send you an email or to send you a message on YouTube or something like that and make sure that they hit you, and without ever meeting you, hit you right where it hurts. So people know how to do that. And the fact that this isn't the first time, that this is like decades ago, that Joe Scarborough is on his show making everyone uncomfortable, joking about Michael Steele's so-called blackness. So we now we know what the deal is. This is an attack on his character, being a black man who's also a Republican. And I can tell you, because I've been hit in the same way, you're not really black. You're not, you hate yourself. You hate black people. You hate your race. You're ashamed of yourself. You hate your parents. You weren't raised right. Your mother didn't love you. And any other, you're a whore. You sleep with white men. I mean, I could keep going, but this is Christian radio. Suffice it to say that the insults that are hurled at black conservatives are personal in nature. The invective is full of hatred and a desire to tear people down. And they want you to be able to hear that when you're in your quiet moments. They hurl those insults so Because you know how it is. You open an email up and you read it. Before you know it, you're a paragraph into some expletive-laden insult about yourself. You can get a preview on email, and they'll often start the preview off. This is what people who used to write me for the Post-Dispatch. I'd write an article, and they'd write me back to get me to open the email. The first line or two of their email would be, I read your article in the Post-Dispatch, and I agreed with some points. You click the email, it opens up, and it opens into, but I disagreed with the rest of it because you are and there they go. They're off to the races. So this kind of commentary from Joe Scarborough, you know, I've never really had any personal feelings about Joe Scarborough. I really feel like he's the kind of person who, back when he was younger, it was all fun and games being a Republican because he was elected first and then he went into television. And that now he likes to say, because I'm a Republican, but he's in love with Mika Brzezinski and she's a liberal and he really toes the lines that she toes. But after hearing this, I would place Joe Scarborough in the same category as those trolls and just the worst kind of people who have emailed me in the past about, you know, deeming to lecture me on my blackness. And make no mistake about it, the same people who will call me anything but a child of God online, in letters, they even write the letters out by hand and mail them to the Post-Dispatch so they could be sent to me at my house. These same people, some of them are white. So is it okay for anyone to say those things? No, but it is especially galling to have someone who's a liberal who considers themselves to be so tolerant. And in the same sentence, they're calling you names and claiming they know who you sleep with, quote unquote. They're also telling you about how they love the black community and they work within the black community and they've been, you know, in a diverse atmosphere ever since they were kids and they don't see color, but they're lecturing you on how you're not black. That's now in the category, because I'd never heard this audio before. It's not even new. This is old commentary from Joe Scarborough, but I now place him in that same category as those individuals who wrote me and email me still to this, this is up to the minute stuff. Constant attacks about the one issue that I really don't have a problem with. I am not ashamed to be a black person. This is the way God made me. I am also, it's not an issue of pride because God made me. So I don't get to take any pride in it. I didn't make myself. So I don't have a problem with it. I do think that it's indicative of a character flaw when people feel comfortable enough to go before a podium or before a microphone and impugn the innate characteristics of another person. If I can't help being a black person and Michael Steele can't help being a black person and no person can help what race they are except Rachel Dolezal, who has taken that to a new level. So what exactly is there for you to impugn? What is that? Being black isn't enough. That's what he said about Michael Steele. So, you know, that changes for me. It kind of changes the dynamic for how seriously I take things that Joe Scarborough says. I mean, it's already bad enough that he spouts that stuff off on Morning Joe, especially the things he says about the president. But this kind of, you know, it basically reorients how I view his comments and how I will consume media in which he is contained. And funny story, I met him at CPAC a couple of years ago. So I think this is my second or third year missing CPAC. And he was walking into the there's a main floor area where there's just off to the side, there's a place where they start the straw poll and you can walk up and take the straw poll during the entire conference. And then you keep going further down and there's Radio Row. And it's kind of the same setup every year because that's why they use the same hotel every year. It's also the same hotel where AliPac meets right after that. So the end of CPAC, that next Monday, AliPac starts. So it's a convention hotel. And so you kind of know the layout. If you've been once, you've been a million times. And since they moved to that location, I have been to CPAC. And so I was standing there near the straw poll area and I had seen some people that I'd known, and in walks Joe Scarborough. And so I walk over and introduce myself and he couldn't have been less interested in talking to me. And I mean, I didn't blame him because how's he to know who I am? He did not know who I was. And I introduced myself and I was kind of saying to him, you know, you really should give more of a balanced representation on your show. And he said, we do. We do have a balanced representation on our show. I'm a Republican. Mika's a Democrat, and we have Democrats and Republicans on. He said, are you saying that because you feel like we need to have you on? And I said, yeah, I do. I actually do. And then he laughed and he said, well, we'll look into that. And I gave him my card. Now, he's never had me on, so, you know, this is not about whether or not I get to go on the show, but suffice it to say, in person, he was, you know, kind of like most media people are. They'll talk to you for a few minutes, but they're not really interested in engaging because they're there to do something. They have a schedule. They have stuff to do. But I just find it interesting that Joe Scarborough would have made this comment about Michael Steele. For all the things he espouses on that show, he claims that he is tolerant. He claims that he doesn't see color. He doesn't see race. But here he is right on the show mocking Michael Steele's ethnic background, something that Michael Steele cannot adjust or change and had nothing to do with. So, you know, take it for what you will. I consider it to be hugely insulting and really indicative of a low character, kind of like an internet troll. And that's why I linked all those things together. So now I want to get to this audio from Ivanka Trump. So obviously, I don't know if you guys have been watching the Olympics. The viewership of the Olympics has been really, really depressed, but still, a lot of people watched it. And Ivanka Trump has spent the last few days before the closing ceremony. She was in Pyongyang, South Korea, and she was really representing the White House. And she looked like she had a lot of fun. So she ended all of that up with an interview with the Today Show on NBC News. And the interviewer decided to ask her about the allegations that are being leveled against her father for sexual misconduct. And she was having none of it. It's number 6.
And on accusations of sexual misconduct against President Trump, allegations he's repeatedly denied. Do you believe your father's accusers?
I think it's a pretty inappropriate question to ask a daughter if she believes the accusers of her father when he's affirmatively stated that there's no truth to it. I don't think that's a question you would ask many other daughters. I believe my father. I know my father. So I think I have that right as a daughter to believe my father.
And you heard her say there, I don't think you would have asked other daughters that. That was a direct referral to Chelsea Clinton, who has very rarely, I think maybe once or twice, been asked directly about her father's misconduct. And so yesterday on The View, which they've now brought Meredith Vieira back, they're desperately trying to maintain peace and order over there since the comments by Joy Behar where she likened Christianity to mental illness. And what they're trying to do is just calm everything down, just smooth those waters over. So they've got Joy, you know, really, she's subdued. I mean, you should watch. There's a different sheriff in town, and they've been told, calm this down, make nice for a while, let this blow over. And so Meredith Vieira is on the program, and they're talking about a number of different topics. And the Clintons come up. And so, you know, poor Meghan McCain is, again, she's the token conservative there. She's placed in a position where anything she says, she's to kind of equivocate, she's to kind of qualify it by saying, you know, as a conservative or as a Republican. And then the women, well, what liberals are doing, et cetera, et cetera. And so she was giving them advice saying, if you want to win coming up, you probably as Democrats should leave the Clintons as far out of the picture as you can. And Joy Behar joins in and says, you know, I am a Democrat and I am a liberal, if you know, as they say, but I do believe that people should be able to protect themselves with, you know, firearms. I'm not completely opposed to the Second Amendment, and I also support the death penalty in certain cases. And she said, I agree with you that, you know, people should leave the Clintons out of this. And she used some descriptors that, I mean, you just don't hear Democrats talk about the Clintons in that way. And so while I'm happy to see people finally drag themselves to a place where they can repudiate the behavior of the Clintons, because in this segment, they actually say in the segment that Hillary Clinton enabled the silencing of women who accused her husband of wrongdoing. We still have to look at the reason why they're doing it. It's wonderful to see them do it. Yay, yippee, you know, fly the flags. But they're doing it because they have a target on President Trump. And so, I don't know if the allegations against the president are true or not. I know that it's a tactic of the left to bring up allegations of sexual misconduct against conservatives, because conservatives tend to be much more straight-laced and care a great deal about, morality. And we tend to boot people out of our party, boot them out of public office, boot them out when they have sexual misconduct. We tend to do that. But with Donald Trump, we're not doing that. And so that's why you're hearing so many people coming from the nether regions, people who've never cared about morality, people who tell you to your face, I like dropping the F-bomb, and I don't care if you don't like hearing it. They'll type it out to you. You say, I wish we could keep this. I'm going to use the F-bomb, and they'll use it over and over and over again until you almost feel like you're being bullied. People who think that children should be able to curse, that children should be able to make sexual choices for themselves. We went to a seminar where it was explained to us that there's a woman here in St. Louis who says she's raising her children, who are 5 and 7, in a sexually affirming household, which means they get to tell other adults what places on their body they like to be touched and what places they don't like to be touched. So if they find something pleasurable, they're allowed to tell an adult to touch them or do that to them. I mean, that is enough to make you want to vomit. But that's the kind of people who are now taking it upon themselves to lecture the rest of the country about sexual morality. I'll go to the source document, which is the Bible, on what is and isn't allowed, but miss me with the virtue signaling from leftists who believe kids can have sex and sex is what's between your ears and not between your legs. You guys don't have any room to lecture anybody, and that includes Joy Behar. So, glad you guys found your morals. Now go learn some more about morals before you come talk to me. When we get back, we'll have Kira Davis of RedState right here on Stacy on the Right. Keep it here.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tim Wildman, president of American Family Association and American Family Radio. We still have seats available for our September tours, Washington, D.C. and Williamsburg. Washington, D.C. and Mount Vernon, that's one tour. And then Williamsburg, Jamestown, and Yorktown, that is a separate tour. Now, we put them back to back so you can do both. If you're flying in from Texas or Montana or California or wherever you may be coming from, so that you can do those tours back to back with us if that's something you so choose to do. Now, Stephen McDowell of the Providence Foundation will be with us all along the way as our historian. Stephen will add context, he'll answer questions, talk about the people, the places, the events that make up our early American history. So for more information on this Spiritual Heritage Tour, go to the website spiritualheritagetours.com. spiritualheritagetours.com for the September tour information.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
Yesterday I talked about a few pieces of legislation that might actually stem gun violence. There is another issue that also deserves attention. How many criminals and potential mass shooters are getting their guns through online gun sales? One report from a number of years ago suggested that this was a potential problem. That is why two members of Congress, Representative Elijah Cummings and Senator Elizabeth Warren, asked the GAO to investigate. In November, they completed their 2.5-year investigation. During the operation, undercover buyers revealed information during their transaction that indicated that they should not be allowed to purchase a firearm. That means they pretended to be felons or individuals with domestic violence or outstanding restraining orders or addicts or unlawful users of controlled substances or people who were dishonorably discharged from the military. Ultimately, there were 72 total purchase attempts that were made with these online vendors. How many of these purchases actually succeeded? The number would be 0. Most of the sellers, in 56 cases, refused to complete the transaction. In another 5, the cases were frozen. And in the remaining 11 cases, it seems that the sellers wanted to take their money without actually delivering the firearm. I might add that another part of the study looked into the dark web. Criminals and terrorists sometimes visit this dark place on the internet where content has been intentionally concealed and special computer software is needed to access it. In that case, the GAO did complete 2 transactions and both are referred for further investigation. For years, we've been hearing stories about the dangerous wild, wild web. It turns out that it may not be as much of a problem when it comes to gun sales. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For more information about issues covered on Viewpoints, visit pointofview.net. Pointofview.net.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on Urban Family Talk.
Welcome back to the show. Thank you so much for being with us today. Your recently modified and almost tested, I feel like a lab rat, but I survived and I'm still here, still kicking. I'm so excited to speak to our next guest. We always have such great conversations, and I really respect her opinions and her writing. She keeps it real in the best possible way and puts all of the information in front of you, and you can you read her opinion, you can see what she thinks about it, but she always leaves enough room for you to think about it and form your own opinion on what it is that she's covering. And she's doing that wonderful job here in a piece that she has up over at RedState about being an African-American NRA member herself. And here's what you want to know. And so welcome to the show, Kira Davis, a contributor to RedState and also podcaster, blogger, writer, author, all that good stuff. Thank you so much for coming on.
Hi, Stacy. It's great to be here, as usual.
I know. It's like sometimes when we talk, I wonder, is it like because something sad has happened and then we're talking? And so this is kind of still the case.
I know.
So, I mean, but it's
maybe
always,
we'll talk about something good someday soon.
I know. Like, well, I know for me, I don't like cats because I'm allergic to them, but we could talk about dogs. That'd be awesome.
I love dogs. I just got a puppy. Her name is Lola.
Oh.
Dogs are great.
What kind of dog is it?
She's a bull terrier mix. She was a rescue from Hurricane Harvey down south. They brought those dogs that were already in the kennels or giving birth to litters during the storm. A lot of them got shipped out to California, so we got her. She's about 6 or 7 months. She's adorable, and she's a hound bull terrier mix, and acts just like a toddler right now.
Okay, that's perfect. I
do feel that I've always felt that dogs are God's gift, special gifts to humans because they're such great companions, and they're irreplaceable.
Yeah, and they know when you've been hurt. You know what I mean? Like they come right over to you. If you've had anything, they come over to you and they're like, "Yeah, you need me," and they will not leave your side until you're feeling better. So, I agree with you. They are God's gift, and it is nice to kind of intersperse our conversation with that to lead in. So. You and I have this in common. We're both Black. We both are also NRA members. We both own guns. And so, this piece you wrote resonates with me a great deal. Can you tell the listeners about, well, first of all, why'd you write this piece? The title of it is, I'm an African-American NRA member. Here's what I want you to know about me. Why'd you write this?
Well, I just was so distressed at all of the hate and the vitriol being thrown around since the terrible Parkland shootings. I was just, even now, I find it inexplicable, the public or the left-wing public's rush to blame, the NRA, which had nothing to do with this, or Dana Lash, who is a mutual acquaintance and friend of ours, and a woman and a mother. I was dismayed to see how people were treating her. And I realized that there was a whole group of people in this country who think of the NRA as kind of like a bunch of white redneck yahoos with Confederate flags and their big trucks, running around shouting, "Yeehaw, everybody get good."
Right.
And I thought, I wish I could talk to people and tell them that the NRA is not what you think it is. It has the word rifle in the title, and I guess that's what makes it difficult for people to understand or be drawn to it, but there are all kinds of people in the NRA. So then I sat down and I said, well, what if I could speak to these people? What would I tell them about myself? And so I wrote that article, hey, I'm an African-American, and I only added that just because I want people to know that the NRA is not what you think it is. And there are all kinds of people in there that would probably surprise you. In fact, I mentioned there are over 5 million. Stacy, since this whole thing started, the NRA has received 500,000 new memberships since the Parkland shooting. So that is 5.5 million people in the NRA right now. So chances are you know somebody who is in the NRA. You probably work with them.
Yeah.
You probably go to school with them.
And they're not all Republicans.
So I wanted people to know.
Yeah, I mean, they're not all Republicans. So absolutely. It's,
No, not at all. Not at all. And not all Republicans, not all right-wingers. Many of them aren't political at all. Many of them are like me, who aren't necessarily pro-gun, but they maybe procured a weapon legally for self-defense or for hunting and joined the NRA because they wanted to know how to safely use that weapon. They wanted to know the laws in their state so that they could abide by those things. And the NRA provides all those resources. And that's why I joined the NRA.
Yeah, I joined because it's a great organization to support because of the work that they do, not just on behalf of the Second Amendment, but hunters and fishers and helping to keep our legislators held accountable for maintaining the public lands. I mean, people don't actually understand that the NRA uses their legislative arm where they lobby for certain legislative acts to advocate for conservation and for people to have more access to federal land so that people who are American citizens who are not paid by the government can help maintain those lands and keep them safe and healthy and beautiful for generations of people who come after them to use. It's really, it's kind of amazing all of the different things that the NRA does. And they have a lot of training organizations like the Eddie Eagle program for kids to teach kids gun safety. And they have training so that if you've just gotten your concealed carry or maybe you're thinking about it, you can take courses online and in person to learn how to get ready for your concealed carry class or have training beyond that or become a range instructor, a women's instructor. I mean, and all of these things the cost is nominal and the training just makes you more aware of how to use these tools. Because in your piece, you said guns, the NRA demystified guns for you. They made them into tools.
Yeah, that is it. I joined the NRA because being a woman who was very gun shy, I wasn't comfortable with weapons. I only got one for self protection. I joined the NRA because they had materials and resources that were tailored for women. So I didn't have to feel embarrassed. And I know people are like, well, what's the difference? Who cares? But as a woman, sometimes it's like, I felt embarrassed. I felt embarrassed to walk into like a gun range and be like, I don't know anything. I felt like I was going to be looked at as like some silly damsel in distress, and I didn't want to be judged. And so the NRA has programs that can, guide you to different places that will have women-friendly training sessions where women can learn how to use weapons with other women and not have to worry about, feeling intimidated by the men that may be around or people with better knowledge than them. And like you say, there's plenty of resources for kids, which if you're a parent and you want to have anything to do with guns, then of course you need to know how to educate your children, how to teach them how to respect weaponry and respect the Second Amendment. So the NRA, that's a responsible thing to do. So the NRA helps with that. And like you mentioned conservation. And here's the thing that blows my mind, Stacy. We live in an era where information is available at your fingertips instantly. And there are millions and millions of people in this country right now having a dialogue about the NRA who have never clicked on their website, who have never read their About Us page, who have never even searched the term to find out what the NRA is and what they do, who have never made an attempt to even speak to somebody in the NRA. And the information is there. It's so easy to find.
It is. And I think it's kind of a knee-jerk reaction when they kind of say, well, the NRA needs to change their position on guns. I actually watched the interview where Dana Lash went on to CNN with Allison Camerata, and Allison Camerata said, how dare you insinuate or even state that media people like mass shootings because we're bloodthirsty or what have you. And she said, how dare you? And Dana handled it. She was as cool as a cucumber. But the point that Dana made was that they allow statements that are untrue to go unchallenged on their network, which feeds into this hysteria that makes people look at the NRA as if any change made by the NRA could actively stop school shootings, when the true onus is on law enforcement. It's on parents. I'm calling on parents and the listening audience to reconnect with their teenagers and to be more aware of which of the kids are troubled, and to pray about the safety of our kids, the return to a more moral center for America, and revival. And then, of course,
prayer works.
Yeah, it does. Absolutely. And we're discounting it. We're leaving all of our power on the field. We're not even picking up all of the available resources that we have, and prayer is one of those. But I feel like there's some things that Dana said in that interview that have not been widely disseminated, namely that while we're talking about the NRA, the national database where if you're a criminal and you're a prohibited possessor, your name goes into a database, and that's the database that, FFLs check before they let you buy a gun. But there are 7 million people who should be on that database, but they're not. That should be a talking point that if you're a liberal or if you're conservative, if you're politically agnostic, you should be pounding that home, because that's a government failure, a reporting issue. It's much larger. The number of people who are prohibited possessors that are currently allowed to possess a gun, that number is greater than the membership of the NRA. The point she makes is fantastic. Why not talk about that?
Right. Well, it doesn't fit the narrative. And I mean, what is so astounding, besides what you just mentioned, I mean, it's all astounding. But another thing that I find astounding is that we have spent the last year and a half in absolute, utter hysterics over President Donald Trump. And he's a Nazi, and he's a racist, and he's a white supremacist. My neighbor down the street has told my daughter on multiple occasions that Donald Trump wants to deport all black people. Don't ask me how they got that idea. They're not from here. They're from a different country. But they have told my daughter on multiple times when she's been at their home that he wants to do that. So there are people who wholeheartedly believe that Donald Trump is a threat to democracy and freedom, and these are the same people that want to disarm us all. I don't know what they want from me. What do you want from me? Is my black son in danger from the police at every moment, around every corner? Or do the police need to be the only people with weapons in this country? Which is it? I do not have the emotional capacity to be outraged about all of these conflicting issues. So I think the best thing to do is to leave as little power in the hands of government as possible, and empower citizens as much as possible to act on their own behalf, to act on their neighbor's behalf, to protect each other, to keep an eye on each other, to support and serve each other. That's really what the NRA does. The idea that the NRA could influence anything like this in any way, they're not a government agency. They're simply a civil rights organization.
Yeah, and so it's perfectly stated. I mean, that's an audio clip for some other person to put on their show. Completely articulates what's going on here. And I would only add, Kira, because I know when you talk about the inability to hold all of like that, so be outraged about Donald Trump being a Nazi, but also let's give him the power to disarm all Americans. You're like holding those things in your brain at the same time, and your brain should explode. Like theoretically, your brain should explode. I can't do it. Yeah, I can't do it either. But I have to go a step further with these liberals. They also believe that the government, numerous arms of the government, FBI, Broward County Police Department. They even blame Governor Scott of Florida. I don't know how it's his problem, but anyway, they believe all those people failed. They also want to give those people the power to fix the problem by giving those people the right to disarm Americans. So again, what brain can hold these things together?
I can't. I cannot do it. I do not have the ability. And furthermore, this is the exact symptom of everything that is wrong with our country right now. We have been rewarding failure for 60 years. And every time that failure turns out to be a massive failure, like we've seen in the last couple of weeks, then we all look at each other and we go, Well, we just didn't do it the right way. We just didn't force people to do the right thing the right way. But this time we'll force people the right way, and then, everyone will be good, and we'll eliminate all bad intentions and all evil, because it's only a matter of the right piece of legislation. I mean, it's just so, even my 5-year-old can kind of get her mind around the concept that you don't give power to faceless people who don't know anything about you or your family. You don't do that.
Yeah, and you also don't say, did you totally mess that up? Like, did you totally jack that up and 17 people died? Well, here's some more power. Take that and do more things with it.
Right.
Don't fire anybody. Don't hold anybody accountable. The same people who jacked this situation up, we feel like you should maybe take on some more responsibility. What? Like, I can't deal with it.
We had a sheriff that stood on stage with Dana Lash at that circus, that travesty, that disgusting CNN town hall that never should have aired. They should just be so ashamed of themselves. I can't express the level of my outrage at the fact that they would do something like that when the people hadn't even had a chance to bury their dead yet. It was just a shameful shame. What did they think it was going to be? But then the fact that Dana Lash and others, Marco Rubio, stood on that stage, did the best they could in a hostile environment, and that Broward County Sheriff, Scott Peterson,
Sheriff Israel. He knew. He knew.
Scott Israel.
Yeah, he knew that they had.
The whole time.
Absolutely. He knew. And he just sat there and let the crowd rail. It was like some kind of gladiator arena. And Dana Lash has actually said that they were given no pre-warning that was the venue. They thought they were walking into like a kind of like a panel discussion, and instead it was like a gladiator arena where people were calling for her to be burned and killed. So I love your writing, and I love you. Thank you so much for coming on today. You guys share this podcast. Give Kira, give her some traction here, and share the article. It's on Facebook now. You can share it from there. Thank you so much for coming on today. We'll talk again soon. And good luck with the new puppy. That's so much good news. All right. When we come back, we'll have the last segment of the show. Keep it here.
What does it take to live an uncommon life? Here's former Super Bowl winning coach Tony Dungy with today's uncommon moment.
I think when I started, I had the same goals as everyone. I wanted to be the best coach that I could be. I never looked at my job as purely a football coach. As I started up the ladder and started interviewing for jobs, I think that was probably the buzzword about me. Well, he's not necessarily as focused in on football and winning as maybe some people would be. His language, his demeanor is not what we're used to. But I wanted to show people that I could do it in that way, and I could still be a Christian, honor the Lord, but be successful in what isn't really perceived as a Christian environment.
New York Times best-selling author Tony Dungy, author of the popular Uncommon book series. Discover more at CoachDungy.com. That's CoachDungy.com.
I'm Larry Nix. I'm very excited to announce that Defining Moments will be joining Urban Family Talk Thursday, March 8th from 6 to 7 p.m. Though Defining Moments will be the newest kid on the block, we've been considered as one of the most engaging, compelling, and empowering programs on radio. We talk to people from all ages, stages, and places, from all walks of life, backgrounds, and cultures about serious matters, life-altering encounters, second chances, and even how to move life forward. All in Defining Moments with Larry Nix, debuting Thursday, March 8th from 6 to 7 p.m. on Urban Family Talk.
Every day of our life is an invitation, is come and dine. We snack and nibble on the word. Remember, the goal is that you learn truths to put to work in your life. Remember, you don't want to learn truth just to say you know it. Your goal should be to learn truth in order to implement it, to put it to work in your life and receive the benefit and the blessing of it, because we will never be fulfilled not fulfilling our purpose and our calling in life. Lock into your purpose.
Tune in to the Hour of Intercession, weekday afternoons at 1 Central on Urban Family Talk.
They want to control who comes into their own personal domain, but when it comes to the United States, it's open season.
No thanks.
So this idea that there's this magical wall, it's like a unicorn wall, it's rainbow colored, and it just separates everything off. It just keeps the money from ever touching anything that might have to do with abortion.
Tap it down.
What happens is those terrible results end up negatively impacting society. That's what she thinks about unborn children. That woman fixed her mouth. She's like Cecile Richards' little sister. Tap it down. I won't link it myself, though, because that won't look good. My buddy over at Columbia Law, he's got connections at the New York Times. He can make this happen. Presto changeo, boomo bango. Yes. So buckle up. Put your seatbelts on, pull your socks up, get yourself ready. Prepare yourself, gird your loins, all of those things and more, because there's so much more for us to find out.
Stacy on the Right, weekday afternoons at 2 Central on Urban Family Talk. This is Stacy on the Right on Urban Family Talk.
They've been trying to get me off of this trail because the Democrats and the media know that it's really only the House of Representatives that has the power to unearth all the shenanigans that they were up to during the last campaign, during 2016 and 17. And the more we peel this back, the more facts that come out, the American people are beginning to learn how corrupt this process really has been, and it's downright scary.
All right, so that's Devin Nunes, and he's saying that only the House of Representatives has the power to unravel the shenanigans of the corrupt Democrats. And, you know, the slogan still stands, scratch a scandal, find a Democrat. And so welcome back to the show, everybody. Last segment of Stacy on the Right here on Urban Family Talk and American Family Radio. We are just moving right through the program. I have to say one more time, you want to read, it's a quick read. So you're not going to spend like 80 minutes reading this piece by Kira, but it so perfectly articulates what so many people believe. And even though she's writing it from the perspective that she and I kind of share it coming from the place of, you know, we happen to be with the permanent tan, but also happen to be NRA members. And we came to it for slightly different reasons, but kind of the same, which is most people respect the fact that the NRA has a training apparatus, and they are single-minded in their focus of making sure that people are safe in their firearms ownership and usage, and to protect the Second Amendment as a right in this country, the right to protect yourself and to protect others. And that's biblical. And so, you know, even though the NRA it's not a religious organization, so many people who are members out of that 5.5 million people are people of faith. They're not just hunters, but they're also law enforcement. Some of them work in, you know, every field you could think of. And they're members not because they're really bent on people dying with guns. It's the opposite. You're protecting and serving those who can't protect themselves when you decide to be a gun owner and then take it that step further and become concealed carry certified. You're offering yourself up. I mean, I just hate the way this is cracking out. I hate the way the focus has been on the National Rifle Association, as opposed to focusing on so many of the things that we've discussed here on the show. So I encourage you to share the program, share the YouTube live stream or the Facebook stream. I know not everyone's on Facebook. If you're listening to the show and you're feeling like what I'm saying is so different from what you're hearing on CNN, it's because it is. They're out to accomplish an agenda. They are an arm of the DNC. Their goal is to make something happen in the 2018 midterms. And that something is either the loss of the House and the Senate to the Democrats so they can impeach the president, or at the very minimum, a sound thumping of the Republicans that will remove some of their mandate to make changes. What has been so interesting to watch is the way that they've messaged the tax cuts. This is February. What are we? Last day of February? No, tomorrow, of course, 28 days. Tomorrow's the last day of this month. So that means 2 paychecks people have seen with their new hire. They're leaving less money in the government coffers. They're still calling this a tax cut for the rich. Kira just explained how their Democrats are telling black kids Donald Trump wants to deport you. This kind of lying is their only refuge. They can't tell the truth. They can't talk about their policy accomplishments. They can't even defend their signature pieces of legislation like Obamacare. And that's because there's a lot of failure going on right there. So, it is what it is, I guess. You take what comes and you do with it whatever you can. And that's what we have to do with this. So I think the shenanigans, scratch a scandal, find a Democrat, We're going to see more and more of that. Yes, indictments have come down, but it has been, I need to point out that the 13 Russians who've been indicted on election interference, first of all, they're not in the United States. So it's largely symbolic, if I'm not mistaken. I believe that's what I read about that. And those are Russian citizens, okay? So they're not Americans. The individuals in Trump world who've been indicted, they're all being indicted for financial crimes that they committed before they became a member of the Trump team, before they ever worked on the campaign. Apparently, Manafort has been under surveillance by our government for over a decade. So they suspected wrongdoing there, and they've just been watching him, I guess. What does that have to do with colluding and trying to negatively or materially impact the election? If there could just be some ground rules by which we could operate, just, tell the truth and don't make stuff up just to suit your own aims. But the Democrats will never agree to that. So I wanted to, just this little piece of Kira's piece over at RedState, where she says, I am not your enemy, nor are you mine. We all know the parable of the Good Samaritan. When Jesus finished telling the story of a Samaritan who stopped to help a dying stranger, after 2 others had passed him by, he asked, which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hand of robbers? The expert in the law replied, the one who had mercy on him. And Jesus told him, go and do likewise. And that's found in Luke 10:36-37. Kira included this in her piece because she believes, as I do, that we are all neighbors, even though we don't all live next to each other. You guys have heard me talk on many occasions about how I see our country as the flag that represents our nation. Only instead of us being, all of us holding our own individual flags, we're the threads that run through the flag, that make up the flag. And it takes all of us to have a flag. We have to be connected. We have to be right next to each other, interwoven with each other, in community with each other. And so it's really not about whether or not we're all in Missouri. I know that's not the case. We live in Missouri. Most of the listeners do not. That still doesn't mean we're not neighbors and that we shouldn't care for one another. And one of the ways we can care for each other is by being really intentional about the way that we have discussions when it's an issue that really draws a lot of emotional response, as it does with guns. And, you guys know my background with it. I mean, I shot marksman on active duty in the Air Force. I've grown up with a big, huge, gun of some sort, government issue on the dining room table every night. My mom would have to tell my dad to get his sidearm off the dining room table because time for the girls to set the table so we can eat dinner. And my dad would then begrudgingly move his service weapon to his bedroom dresser in my parents' bedroom every night growing up. I don't remember a time where firearms weren't in our home and in our lives because my father was a military policeman. And so I know that there is powerful destructive force in tools known as firearms, but I also know that people can kill other people using almost anything. And that the majority of the firearms use in our country is the protecting and serving kind. And until we disarm all of the criminals, we can't even begin to discuss disarming law-abiding citizens or raising the age of being able to purchase a firearm. If a person can go overseas and kill foreign combatants on behalf of the United States, supporting and defending the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, then they can certainly own a firearm when they're here on our soil and they're not serving their country. And that's just it. So all of this talk about changing age limits and all of it, it's a distraction. In order to be those threads, in order to be together, we have to actually be willing to have conversations that mean something, conversations that matter about things that matter. So, we have plenty of time. Let's go to the phones. We have Eon from Arizona. Hey, thanks for calling in to Stacy on the Right.
Hey, Stacy, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. So I'd like to actually talk about the shooting a little more in depth in Florida, or from maybe a tinfoil hat perspective.
Okay.
I'm looking at this, and originally I was like, okay, here we go again, another issue. They're going to be gun grabbing right away, yada yada yada, and obviously that occurred or is happening. But I'm looking at this and I'm saying to myself, wow, you had so many failures that to me this doesn't look like it was accidental failure. To me, this looks like it was a driven agenda. I'm not saying that this guy was, hired to do this or anything like that. But what I'm saying is, I feel that there were too many times where this individual was flagged and nothing was done. Mm-hmm. That to me right there says, I don't know who, I don't know where, I don't know why, but people were giving the order to do nothing. And then, you top it off with one armed personnel live on the site, and then 3 more, show up within a minute or two, and they don't, go after this individual. I am just, and I'll give you a little background about me. Not that I'm in crime race like that, but my job is one that deals a lot in, you don't really have an outcome until everything's right. It's very theoretical. Mm-hmm. So when I see things, when I look at patterns and they seem to match certain things, and you have a group of people that have an agenda, I just don't see this any other way than, hey, people were told not to act. And that's really all I got to say about the shooter. Now, as far as talking about, gun ownership, I'm calling from Arizona. There is no state in the union that has more guns per capita. This is the freest gun state in the nation. And I'll share this. I live in a town of about 237,000 people. 2 times over the past 10 years, we were the largest municipality in America with no murders. On the flip side of that, I was actually raised in Western New York, outside of Rochester, New York. Rochester this past year just celebrated the fact that it had under 30 murders for the first or second time in like 30 years. So I live in a town that in a decade has had 22. Forget whether they were gun or not gun. Just overall murders. 22 versus 29. 10 years versus 1. And that 1 year is your best year. That just shows right there. And New York being one of the strictest gun states in the union.
Wow. So you've shared a mouthful there. Well, first thing I want to say is you brought up, you said like share something in tinfoil hat and all that. You're not alone. So I've had this kind of in my, you know how you think something and you press it down and you don't say anything, you just kind of keep it to yourself. That's how I felt about this whole story about Parkland from day one. Like before they even announced that the police officer had stood around outside and not went in, and then the other 3 officers, which that was announced a few days afterwards. Before that was even announced, the first thing I thought when I heard that the FBI had been alerted twice and that he'd been in trouble at the school and that a lot of kids felt like he was going to be a school shooter was I thought to myself, how convenient that no one did anything and he went on to kill 17 people. And then as the story has unfolded, that little kind of thought in my head has been getting louder and louder. This is planned. This was orchestrated. This was something that, now obviously I did cover yesterday on the show that I just read that President Obama's Promise program or something like that was, implemented to stop black kids from being sent to prison and, expelled from school in disproportionate numbers. And it was supposed to help those kids have a chance at graduating from high school. But what it did was it tied federal funding to refusing to prosecute kids for crimes while they're in high school. And that program was what they called hugely successful in Broward County. And so that was part of the reason why the police weren't responding. Whether you believe it was an orchestrated effort that is now being used by the left to vilify the NRA and implement gun control, or whether it was a perfect storm that came together because a bunch of lawless people like Barack Obama and others who don't care about kids were in charge and it was our fault because we elected them.
Right.
It doesn't matter how you get there. How we get here is we're here. And the truth is this didn't happen by accident. It didn't happen in a vacuum. And so, I think you're dead on. Your points are well made. And I think one more thing I would add to what you said about the criminality. This is well-documented statistical fact from numerous organizations, including the federal government of the United States, which tracks all firearm deaths, that the more guns there are per capita in a county, the lower the crime rate is. And that is the case here in Missouri, in the county where I live,
absolutely.
And all over the country. So, you know, it's really, I know it sounds cliche, but more guns, not less. Sorry, it is.
Absolutely. And if I would say one more thing, I just did a quick look. So between in 2016, between Chicago, New York City, Philadelphia, Baltimore, and LA, you have the 5 largest murder amounts of murder, not per capita, but just the 5 largest amounts of murder per capita, or in the United States between those 5 cities. The interesting thing is, if you look at their population, it's 5.3% of the
30 seconds.
time.
All right, we got about
They
30
made up
seconds.
For almost 11.6%.
Thank you so much for calling and for all that wonderful information. As I always say, my callers are the best. Thank you so much, and have a great evening. And God bless to everyone who tuned into the show today. Hoping to feel better tomorrow, Lord willing. Pray for your girl. I'm dealing with some stuff over here. Be back with you hopefully tomorrow. God bless you. Have a great night.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast do not necessarily reflect those of Urban Family Talk, Urban Family Communication,